House Democrats ushered in the new year by voting on a new package of rules that includes something called PayGo. Now, any of us who have been financing nerds or government finance nerds have known the term PayGo, meaning pay as you go. Our next guest has written about the Democratic leadership's decision to institute a PayGo rule as part of this new package of how the House is going to be run under Democratic leadership. He is, in my view, one of our leading financial journalists today. I always read his work. I always look forward to reading his work. David Dayen is a fellow for In These Times and a contributor to The Intercept. His first book, Chain of Title, which was about the foreclosure crisis and foreclosure fraud, was an award-winning book. His new book, which he has co-authored, Fat Cat, The Steve Mnuchin Story, is now out on Strong Arm Press. And he joins us now. Dave, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me on. Happy New Year.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year to you. So first of all, Dave, before we get into PayGo, I hear a rumor you got a new job coming up this year.
Yes, I am fortunate enough to have been named the new executive editor of the American Prospect, which is one of the preeminent liberal magazines that covers policy. I'm going to be replacing Bob Kuttner, big shoes to fill, and I start in June.
Well, congratulations on that. I think it's fantastic. The Prospect is an important journal, and I look forward to seeing where you take it. So congratulations on that. And speaking of changes, we have a change of leadership in the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi announced very quickly upon Democrats winning that she would reintroduce the rule called PayGo, and you've kind of been leading the national conversation about that in certain ways, which I appreciate. First of all, what is the PayGo rule?
Right. So this is a rule that Nancy Pelosi actually first instituted when she first became Speaker back in 2007. And it's kind of what it sounds like, pay as you go. It means that any new spending program that is put into legislation must be offset with either cuts elsewhere in the budget or tax increases, so that the legislation is budget neutral through the 10-year budget window, which is the way that things are scored in Washington. And it will be up to the Congressional Budget Office to make the determination of whether something violates PayGo or not. And so that is the rule. As I said, it was in place during Nancy Pelosi's first speakership. When Republicans took over, they modified it and did something called CutGo, which said that all new spending would have to be offset only by cuts in the budget, not by tax increases. And it also said that tax cuts, that kind of legislation, would not be subject to the PayGo rule. There's also, and this is how it gets kind of confusing, there's an actual legislation, there's statutory PayGo, that is separate and apart from the chamber's rules in Congress. There is a statutory law that Pelosi put forward in 2010, was signed by Barack Obama, that says that if there is an imbalance in any particular budget year, that there is automatic sequestration, cuts across the budget that has to be done. However, that can be waived. All of these things can be waived by acts of Congress, by the way. But really the issue around PayGo is that it creates this environment that says that everything that Democrats do we cannot engage in public investment without announcing upfront where in the budget you're going to cut or what taxes you're going to increase. And it creates an imbalance because Republicans, when they get in, obviously, as I just told you, they have no problem blowing holes in the budget through tax cuts, being Santa Claus and doing endless run-ups in perhaps the military budget or by cutting taxes. But Democrats have to be the party of fiscal responsibility. And this creates a political imbalance. It's really a political problem as much as anything.
So the labor politician Anthony Wedgwood Benn said in the 90s, I believe it was, no general ever said, "I'd love to bomb Baghdad, but I don't have the budget." And so there's that whole thinking that says Republicans just do what they want. There's also the thinking that says that some of our greatest periods of national growth and prosperity were either preceded by or accompanied by deficit spending. I mean, the obvious example being World War II and then the decades of post-war prosperity that followed that. We went deeply into a deficit state during World War II that was reduced somewhat afterwards, but significantly afterwards. But you get where I'm going with this, right? Which
Absolutely.
is so.
It's not good budgetary policy to say that everything has to be paid for up front. It's just ahistorical. It's not good economic theory, and it ends up constraining you in kind of hidden ways. The Economic Policy Institute, Josh Bivens, put out a report with EPI talking about PayGo, and he discussed how this was a real hindrance in the economic recession that we just had. That even though certain like stimulus package, PayGo was waived for that particular legislation, but the lingering sort of attitude that everything had to be paid for created a pull back to austerity that was too soon and left the growth and job employment statistics lingering far beyond where they should have. Bivens puts out this incredible stat that if public investment was at the same level that it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the time during the recession, then we would have gotten back to what you would consider full employment, the employment statistics we have today in 2013. Now, we waited 5 years, almost a lost half decade, because we didn't engage in that public investment. And so PayGo, while it's a political situation, it really has real world effects as well.
And they can be devastating. They can be lifelong for the people who were unemployed for years as a result. And you also get into this logic of, the multiplier effect, where, especially in times of recession, $1 spent in the government might yield $2 of growth or in the overall economy. And why wouldn't you want that? You get into the death spiral where government spending is cut, and that leads to less prosperity and therefore less revenue, which leads to more cuts. So there are a million ways in which it's a bad idea. I would argue, David Dayen, but I want your thoughts on this. I would argue that this is, number one, ideological, very ideologically based, in a false view of what government should do, and basically an underlying philosophy that is anti-government, that wants to make government as small as possible, and that people like the late billionaire Peter Peterson, who was eulogized, by the way, by Nancy Pelosi, among others, people like Pete Peterson were instrumental in getting people to think that this was somehow a force of nature, that, as Barack Obama and others have said, that government has to act like a family sitting around the kitchen table trying to balance their budget, which it totally doesn't, because that's not how it works when you issue your own currency. So I would argue that this is an ideology that the Democrats are shackling themselves to,
Right,
to the detriment of their own political, as well as economic.
I can't get in Nancy Pelosi's head necessarily, but she certainly has said that, in the past, that Democrats are proud to wear the mantle of fiscal responsibility. There's certainly a lot of concern within the Democratic leadership over not being seen as tax and spend liberals. It's kind of an extension of how Washington is sort of wired for conservatism, how the voices of deficit hawks take prominence, how liberalism is kind of tarnished regardless of the economics, and this fiscal responsibility. There's almost a race between among Democrats to take that mantle head on. I think that the fact that this got so much attention this time around shows that there is a crack in this armor a little bit, that there are progressives and people like Stephanie Kelton, who believes in modern monetary theory, which says that government is not as constrained by budgetary forces as you would think, that there's another narrative that's seeping in that that Democrats in the leadership are going to have to contend with. Now, this is going to pass today on Thursday, the first day of the Congress, and it's not going to matter that much. I mean, Trump is still president. Republicans still hold the Senate. I don't think there's going to be a lot of deficit spending going on in the next 2 years for which PayGo would be an obstacle in any way. This is about the future. This is about progressives thinking, how are we going to achieve the things that we really not just want to achieve, but think is vital to the safety and security of the American people? A Green New Deal, Medicare for all. How do you do it when you're shackling yourself in this way from a budgetary standpoint? So I think the key vote here is not the rules package in 2019. It's in 2021. It's in 2 years if Donald Trump is defeated, if Democrats take back the Senate, if there's a real opportunity to engage in public investment again. Are we going to have this rule in place? Are we going to have the statute in place? Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal have said they are going to introduce legislation to end statutory PayGo. So I think over the next 2 years and more education of members of the general public is going to be done around this, kind of obscure concept to make sure that it doesn't get in the way when it would really matter.
See, here's why, Dayen, here's why I think your analysis is right on the money. Because I agree, it doesn't matter, quote unquote, in the sense that, first of all, Congress could override it. It could override that rule. It could cancel the statutory PayGo law. It could do all of those things when it wants to. It's not going to right now. We've learned that. I know a lot of my friends on the left, and I don't mean that in the Barack Obama sense, my friends on the left. A lot of my friends on the left are angry because Pramila Jayapal and Mark Pocan have indicated they'll vote for this rules package and so on. Well, they got some things in the rules package.
Right. They got some good stuff in the rules. I mean, there's they reinstate the Gephardt rule, which ends hostage taking on the debt limit, which is, I think, pretty important. The rule gets rid of dynamic scoring, which was this pseudoscience that Republicans put in that claimed that tax cuts pay for themselves because of the dynamic effects throughout the economy. There are a lot of things that I put in my piece at The Intercept that progressives can say they got as wins in the rules package and also in committee assignments in the 116th Congress. PayGo is not one of them, but we have 2 years. I feel like progressives think they have 2 years to make the case on this and try again.
Yeah, and I think that's right on the money, and I love your forward-thinking view of this, which I think is so important, that this is really about laying down markers for the future. This is about kind of trimming the sails of the debate so that it moves back in a more rational direction. We've had Stephanie Kelton on the show several times. We certainly try to do our part here, but I think the notion that the Democratic leadership is next time this comes up, they're going to be, this is not settled policy anymore.
And just remember one other thing.
Sure.
Nancy Pelosi has said that she's term limited now, right? In order to get the speakership, she said, I will do 2 years, and then there will be a vote. I can get a 2-year extension, but I will need a 2/3 vote of the entire Democratic caucus in order to get that 2-year extension, which would be my last extension and my last term as speaker. So the Progressive Caucus is more than 1/3 of the Democratic caucus right now, and it probably will be after 2020. So there's an opportunity here to say, we will make you speaker again if you get rid of this PayGo rule.
Yeah, and so I think that my interpretation, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to conclude, my summary on all of this is PayGo is a terrible idea, but we're finally having a debate about it. The winds seem to be shifting, and longer term, in the next year, 2 years, 4 years. I'm optimistic that by 2020, we could look back on this as the moment when things started to move in the right direction. What do you think?
You're right. Yeah, I think it's an important moment, and I think the getting the education level up and getting members to understand what the implications of this are economically, politically, is going to be crucially important. And I think we finally have some kind of people in place that are going to make this a priority, that aren't going to just bring this up every 2 years around the rules package for the House, that are going to make this a priority both in the House, in the Senate, and in the statutory realm, to make sure that Democrats are able in the future to engage in public investment again.
Yeah, I think and I look forward to that because there's a lot of investments still to be made. So unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. But Dayen, a fellow friend these times, contributor to The Intercept, soon to be at the American Prospect. Great reporting, and as always, great to talk to you.
All right, thank you.